Important things in any baking recipe, but for cookies too, is butter. Now with cookies, especially chocolate chip cookies, if you look online, there's multiple different ways that you can make a cookie. Some start with cold room temperature butter, some say softened butter, and some say melted butter. It's very important that whatever recipe you're following, that's what you do, because that is what's going to make it a soft cookie if you read a soft cookie recipe, or a crumbly cookie, or whatever kind of cookie you're looking for. The butter can make a big difference. Regardless, you always want to use unsalted butter when you're baking. You can't read this because it's backwards, but you want to use unsalted butter because you want to be able to control the salt in your recipe, and if you use unsalted butter, then you can. It's okay if you have to use salted, but try not to. It'll just make your recipes more controlled, which is kind of what baking's all about. So sugar is next after butter for most drop cookies, and this is where your recipe will say, this one says, 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar, 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar. Now here's why you might be able to have a little bit of fun. Your cookie is going to take on a different flavor by the amount of brown sugar you put in it. Personally, I love brown sugar. You can't just like eat it with a spoon, but it's one of my favorite ingredients. It makes your molassesy cookies. It just gives that chocolate chip cookie, especially the dough, that really home-baked flavor that you don't get with regular sugar or mostly like packaged products. So I kind of like to use a little bit more brown sugar and a little bit less of the white stuff when I can. And with a drop cookie, as long as the end amount of sugar is the same, you can do it too. Now, even though you might think of sugar and brown sugar as dry ingredients, they're actually part of the wet ingredients, which start in the mixer like we did. The dry ingredients is the flour, baking soda or baking powder, and salt. You want to mix these together before you put them with the wet ingredients because it evenly disperses those little ingredients, the baking soda or powder or the salt. Now, the powder versus soda thing, really, again, look at your recipe. I am not a scientist, so that part I always just do what they tell me to do. But with salt, I've actually been doing something really fun. Anytime a recipe has chocolate in it, I put a little bit of sea salt in it, either on top or in the recipe. It's actually an amazing way to bring the chocolate flavor out in your cookies. And since these cookies will be having chocolate in them for sure, this will get a little sprinkle of sea salt in them as well. And remember, scrape the sides of the bowl. Super important. Again, with the even distribution kind of thing, you're going to get at least 24 cookies out of this batch. And you want to make sure each cookie has sugar in it. Real important. But also that each cookie has the right amount of flour, salt, butter, eggs, and vanilla in them too, so they all taste the same and all taste delicious. And with the eggs, they say to do them one at a time. So do them one at a time. Also, most ingredients that you find in your fridge can actually sit out for a good half an hour before you start baking. So don't be afraid to have your milk, your eggs, your butter, anything that's cold, sit out for a while because you actually want your entire cookie batter to be the same temperature. And when it's time to add the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients, you don't want to do it all at once. Number one, you will make a mess. And number two, you just don't want all that flour going into the sugar butter deliciousness all at once because it just will actually probably take longer in the end to get it all at one consistency, and then this way you can just ease it in. Now comes my favorite part, chocolate time. So from all of my chocolate chip cookies, almost always, I do not use just one flavor of chocolate. I think it's really fun for your mouth if you use two flavors. So here I have a cup of semi-sweet going in, and I'm going to pour myself a cup of milk chocolate. Sometimes it's really cool to use discs and chips, so they're different sizes too, and then the discs melt into the batter. If you've never experienced it, now's the time. So here's my other cup of chocolate chips, and I'm just going to let the mixer do my work for me, and then pop them on the sheet. Just like with cakes, pan preparation, super important. You want to use parchment paper again. It's pretty much the clear winner in baking. And also, even distribution, very important. Aside from the fact that all your guests want the same size cookie, more importantly, you want your cookies to bake at the same time. So you want each little guy to be ready at the same time. You don't want to have to overcook some of them and undercook other ones because then you just will be really sad. And you don't want to be sad when you're making cookies. Making cookies is the best day of the week. And once you have your cookies evenly distributed on your cookie sheet, and they're all the same size, it's time to pop them in, and then we'll see what deliciousness comes out in about 10-12 minutes. And then when you're done, you'll have identical cookies, same size, perfectly cooked. perfectly delicious.